let's make this
Yes,
about
go
you,
ahead.
buddy, because this is why
Okay.
I invited you on here. And people, I
Yes.
don't think people know much about Thom Calandra, who I'm speaking with. He's a newsletter writer, and actually, a little bit about his past is he was the co-founder of MarketWatch back in the '90s. I don't think a lot of people know that about you, but co-founder of MarketWatch back in the '90s, and he's been
Hmm.
writing his report, his newsletter for 20 years. So I think around
At least.
2003, I think you started writing your newsletter.
Well, no, no. Yeah, 1997 when we started MarketWatch. But yeah, no problem. Whatever.
Okay.
I think that you know, I think that I was just a journalist, right, Robert? Not just a journalist, but I happened to get, very fortunate. I don't believe in luck and a lot of hard work, but we hit the window with creating a free Bloomberg on the internet because I had worked at Bloomberg in London and a lot of newspapers and magazines and broadcast, and then a very smart uh, financial guy, a former editor, said, "Let's make this come back from London, and let's roll with this." So I came back to Sausalito in Marin County, where we lived, my wife and and I had been working at Bloomberg, and we created the free Bloomberg on the internet, and I was the editor in chief and one of three or four people max that started it, and I wound up hiring a lot of journalists around the world, 100 maybe 110, and it was a real company, and we sold it to Dow Jones in, I want to say, 2005, 2004, and for 520 million cash. And now it's the Wall Street Journal. It used to be CBS MarketWatch and Financial Times MarketWatch, and I'm not associated anymore. And and I had a very popular newsletter, and I was the editor in chief, and then I passed that along to another great editor, and he, and focused on the writing. And I got my hand slapped there toward the end by the SEC for being a little. These were the early days of the internet, a little fast and loose and crazy. And we all made a lot of money, and and I think we set a standard for financial journalism that's free on the internet. So there.
MarketWatch is, I mean, I remember when I was first getting into markets, like the very first time was probably in the early 2000s, and that was one of my go-to sites. And it's still useful today, although they've got so many different paid content tiers and so much advertising they throw up there. It's definitely changed for the worse. But
Yeah.
that's how these businesses have to survive today. You have to do advertising or else they just can't pay their bills. So that's what they're doing. But actually, I didn't
Yeah.
know that Wall Street Journal
Sure.
owns the whole thing. They basically have
Yeah.
the whole empire of financial news.
And I think, sure. And I think Dow Jones used one of the reasons they bought the company was that they wanted a culture that could show their folks how to create uh, free content. That wasn't easy in the late '90s, early 2000s. There was that debate going on. Do you create a subscription site? Do you find a way to make this work? And many companies were loath to put out their content for free. So that was helpful. There were very few that did it well. New York Times did it well and created one of the most valuable subscription lists probably in the world, and it still is, right? Opt-in subscribers, and then blended that into their advertising model, right? So that if you took an ad out, you were getting both digital and print. So, I think we were fortunate to hit the World Wide Web in 96, 97, and I felt great. And then I'm sure your next question, Robert's going to be, well, then when did you get into commodities and
No,
gold? And
no, no. That's not my next
no,
question. I was going somewhere else.
no.
So
Oh,
it's
okay.
interesting because my father had a favorite saying. My late father, he passed away in 2017. He said, Robert, if you have a choice of being smart and being lucky, always be lucky. And the timing of getting into the internet and financial media in 96, 97 couldn't have been a luckier timing, because we know what the stock market did over the next 5 years and how, the internet absolutely exploded. So your timing was impeccable. Was that an example of being smart or being lucky, Tom?
Well, I would say that the 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 s- the smarts there came from you know, my former editor at the San Francisco Examiner, Larry Kramer, who said, "Well, let's roll this out for free people." They had, we used a company called Data Broadcasting Corporation's data feed, which was the ticker on the bottom of almost everything that you could see, at least in North America, uh, and attaching a news product to that was, I guess, the smart idea. But then you had a lot of hard work. But yes, definitely the timing was impeccable. Tech stocks were hot. We were known for tech stocks. I was Mr. Tech. I mean, I wasn't Mr. Gold. I was writing and broadcasting and coaching and having our team, our editorial team around the world report on technology, right? The internet stocks. And that was wild and woolly. But yes, we were very fortunate on our timing. And then I think in the late '90s, when I went back to London to work to create Financial Times, MarketWatch, and a couple of other European ones that no longer exist, like Les Echos MarketWatch or um, Deutsche MarketWatch. Well, gold was trading at 250,
Hmm.
260, and even even I could figure out, because I'd always been a value investor, and my wife's dad, Papa, who also passed away around the same time your dad did. Papa worked. He was the treasurer controller at Homestake Mining in San Francisco, one of the oldest continuously traded uh, New York Stock Exchange stocks, until it got bought by Barrick. Even though he never bought an ounce of gold or silver in his life, it made me more aware. And actually, I had to cover homestake mining in the old days when I worked at the San Francisco Examiner. So that was all like seemed logical, and I started getting into gold there in the late '90s
Okay,
in
I'm
London.
still not ready to get into gold, but we're almost getting there. Uh,
Oopsie.
it's funny how your mind thinks about how we're going to segue the conversation, but um, we have a few things in common. One of them is that we were born in the same place, the same city. Tell us about your early days in Manhattan, in
Well, Brooklyn,
New
right?
York.
I mean, yeah, I mean, for me, growing up in one of the five boroughs, being born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, is a second generation Italian American. Uh, it was, Brooklyn, New York in the '70s was what's that word that all the magazine writers love to use? I mean, hard scrabble, Gravesend, Brooklyn. It was no walk in the park, right? I mean, it was tough. I mean, people were getting shot and killed and mugged and stuff. And I don't want to make it sound terrible, but compared to today, right? It's as you know, Robert, when you go back to New York these days, we were just there for a wedding in I want to say October. It's winter wonderland. It's summer beauty. It's everything. It's money.
It's
And that's
funny
happening.
how it's so interesting because I live in South Florida, so there's so many former Manhattan, Staten Island people down here. And the opinion of the city today is very different, all depending upon who you talk to. The way you speak about it, it's a winter wonderland. It's a beautiful city. And it is. It is. For a lot of people, it is. If you have money, it definitely can be. But then for a lot of other people, say, I would never go back there. I would never live there. I hate the city. It's gone to hell.
Yeah. Well, E.B. White, a great essayist, and also wrote The Elements of Style for writers. E.B. White in the '40s, I want to say, wrote a terrific essay. I think it was called Manhattan. And he said there are three great New York cities. You know, the first one is the New York of the folks who grew up there. They take it for granted. Uh, or they did anyway in the '40s, '50s, '60s, '70s. The next is the New York City of the commuter, right? The tri-state commuter comes in from Long Island, Connecticut, uh, New Jersey, and stuff like that. But the greatest New York of all is the New York for folks who are moving there or become aware of it from somewhere else, whether they're from the Midwest or from South America or from the UK, right? I mean, I am always running into people from London, former friends and just ordinary folks that I don't even know. So, oh, I love New York. I love New York. So that's the greatest New York of all. But I have an appreciation seeing it, right? And having spent the first 22 years of my life, I feel good. I mean, all of our family now is outside of New York. Um, one in Boca, one in DC, one in Scottsdale, and one here in Tiburon, California. And these are the siblings. But I don't know. I just, I see, you go through New York and it's like, whoa, that's my neighborhood. That's Gravesend. It used to be entirely Italian, and then it became Russian, and now it's like 25 different nationalities.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, it's interesting because New York in the '70s, especially in the Italian neighborhoods, that was the mafia peak period, late '70s, early '80s, where
you
you
know,
had the
my
mafia really running the
my
entire
final
city.
yeah, my final year, and and then it was like a week or two before I was going to graduate from Brooklyn College, which was a terrific, and still is a terrific school there. Um, and walking home from Brooklyn College, sometimes I would take that long walk back into Bensonhurst, Gravesend, and I missed by 1 minute. There, I'm walking by this car, and and it's just smoking, and it's in front of this. We owned Joe's Bar and Grill, my uncle, and we inherited it. But there was another Joe's 3 blocks down, and and this car's smoking. And then all of a sudden the sirens and stuff like that, and I could just barely see. There's this guy in the car, and he had just gotten blown away by. It was a big story in the New York Daily News, and New York Post, and Newsday. The next day, it was a hit, right? An
Hmm.
Italian guy, like a mid-level capo, and then his foot got stuck. Yeah, his foot got stuck on the gas pedal, and the car was
Oh,
burning up, and you know, and I swear that was. But I saw. I was fortunate or unfortunate enough to see one other hit, and then
hmm.
working behind the bar at my uncle's place was, let's say, always an adventure because it was a terrific restaurant, Italian food, but we also had the only liquor license like in a 20-block area at the time.
Oh,
So
wow.
I mean, we got
That's a
everything.
valuable asset. Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah. New York is the greatest city on the planet. At least that's what I still think to this day. And yeah, I'm biased. I was born there, but it really is a magical place, and it is also an example of the full spectrum of life and being human. You see it all. You see
mm,
every imaginable experience you could possibly have as a human being you can have
mm,
in New York City, including going shopping on Fifth Avenue and then walking down the avenue and seeing a jetliner crash into a building.
yeah,
This is
yeah,
only possible in New York City.
yeah. In October, we went up to Harlem and we had, we went to Jazz Museum and a terrific restaurant, famous restaurant, and all that other stuff, and went to see the old Apollo Theater, and even that has become gentrified. I mean, it's hard. It's challenging right now to find areas of New York City, and you can. There are some that are in trouble, right?
Hmm.
I mean, let's face it. I think the police department would have another opinion, and there is crime everywhere. But as you know, when the economies rise and people have money, crime decreases. So that's good.
All right, so
Robert,
let's make the
yeah.
transition to investing and junior mining. So definitely you have you've had a very fortunate life, and you said you started noticing the value of gold at 250 an ounce in the early 2000s. And so, how did you get into writing about junior mining? Like, what was some of the first companies, people that you covered?
Oh well, I was, being the editor in chief, you could do whatever you want, right? But but really, as a reporter, columnist, editor, I'd have to say, um, back in 99, 2000, 2001, and onward, some of the great my great initiations into gold. Of course, I have to start with Ivanhoe uh, Plot Reef, which was the platinum project in South Africa, which was private at the time. Ivanhoe Mongolia, which was the original Ivanhoe Mines. Ivanhoe Energy, which no longer exists. And so, there you had the the great one, I guess people call him. He's lived up to everything that he's promised over the past 35 years, and that's Robert Friedland. I remember seeing him in 1991 as a reporter, and my friend Paul, my mentor Paul Stevens from Robertson Stevens, who became and is still a terrific money manager, said, "Oh, you should go see this guy speak." And he was I think he was speaking at the Stanford Court or somewhere. So I was a reporter, and I went and reported on it. And here, he was. It might have been, I forget which company at the time it was. This was pre Voices Bay. But he was compelling, right? Even in 1991 or 92, he started with all the gold in the world could fit in, half this auditorium, that kind of thing. And I was impressed, but I didn't get to meet him until 10 years later, roughly. And then got to go with him several times, at least, around the world. Thank you for that. And Mongolia, China, um, Ghana, South Africa, and a few other places, the Middle East. Really got to understand the business. So, Robert, that's how I.
Robert Friedland, yeah, he is a unique personality because he has a special sort of energy about him. He has a force about him that very few men have. And I'm a very large man, as you know, Tom, and
Yes,
I've
you are.
stood side by side with Robert Friedland, and I felt his power. He definitely has a special way about him, and the way he does presentations is unique. He can make topics that are fairly boring for most people, and anybody who doesn't even understand mining at all can be interested and captivated by his presentation. Very few public speakers can do that. And that's a special skill. Taking something that is not interesting and making it very interesting and captivating. That is a power.
I think we were at the. I happen to think that I've captured his energy in writing, especially, as well, or better than almost anyone over since the 90s. And we were at the Denver Gold Show. It might have been about a year ago in Colorado Springs, and I was fortunate to have my wife there with me. And she walks in just as Robert's giving his keynote presentation, and he has some great opening lines, and this one, and I paraphrase. I can go to the Calandra report and read the exact quotes and stuff, but it was, gold mining is the dumbest business in the world, the dumbest, and anybody who'd get into it, that kind of thing. And that, I remember,
Yeah, he
she
says
looked at
that a
me, and
lot.
yeah, Mara, my wife, looked at me and raised an eyebrow, and it's like, well, he knows how to get people's attention, and he always has. But the other side of that, he is, aside from his, what we see, Robert, um, as investors or people receiving his wavelength when he's giving presentations, is that there's a lot of hard work. He has to manage these companies, whether it's
Mm.
Ivanhoe Mines or Ivanhoe Electric, which I've just started getting into, or Ivanhoe Capital, the mothership, or HPX and these other companies. He has to manage people. He has to, if you put your a CEO hat on and say, well, how do you manage people? I remember hearing him say, you have to let people feel like, you have to give them the freedom to fail. And once they fail, you know, you, you, you hope that they can learn from that, and you set up a matrix that, where they can learn from that. And that's a lot of hard work. I mean, you have these what I call file cabinet CEOs, and they never ever interact with their staff. And he has so many people working with him, and he's not just interacting with executives, although he is, and board members, and he is. He's interacting with the folks who work for him, whether they're in the Congo, right, or in South Africa, or now in Angola, or um, Australia. You know what I mean? It's
Hmm.
it's impressive, and I think he's pulled it off. I mean, everyone's saying he's hyperbolic and volatile and intense, but he's delivered. And I'm happy to say, it's I'm sure this question will come from you. It's like one of your what was one of your great investments, Ivanhoe Mines Mongolia, Ivanhoe Mines Africa, which is the current Ivanhoe Mines, and we're lucky here at home to hold more than $1 million worth of that one. So there you go.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what your greatest investment was. So that is it. Robert Friedland's companies. And I recall a lot of people say negative things about Friedland, that he's a salesman, he's a used car salesman, he's overly prom- promotional, and I've witnessed some of his overly promotional pitches. He gets away with saying some stuff that I think other people would have the SEC after them for, but that's how the great salesmen do. They're able to sort of walk on water to some extent. His favorite thing was, you don't wait to buy this stock. You buy it right now. You don't wait to buy it. You buy it right now, and you buy it with everything you can, and you give it to your children and your grandchildren. And I'm just like, God, if I was a CEO and I said that, I know that the SEC would be calling me the very next day. But he gets away with it, and he has a certain power. And the results, right? So when you have good results, you're given a little bit of grace. You're given a little bit of a leeway, I guess.
Yeah,
And the results speak for themselves.
sure. I mean, he does. He look. There have been. I think there have been a couple of failures, but that one in Colorado that earned him kind of an unfair nickname, and I won't repeat it here because his successes far dwarf his his small failures. But I can tell you, on the personal side, he does not suffer fools gladly, as that saying goes. And if you're going to be the person in the court of Robert that oh, I don't know, that has the dunce cap on, you're going to feel his wrath. So I don't know if this is what it takes to be a successful a leader, but he is a leader, and I think he's managed it into his 70s now with grace and aplomb. So we can switch to, by the way, Robert, Robert. speaking of Speaking of great investments, I mean, I've had a couple that were outside of the mining field, like Tencent Holdings in Hong Kong, right, or Illumina, the genomics tools company, and and I think that some of those returns have been, spectacular, and I wish I still owned them. So, so, but really, I feel so good about the mining sector, as they call it, and the mining business, because it's just such a treacherous business and unkind, but so necessary for us. And what I've seen in the past 30 years is it's really cleaned up its act. I don't know. I mean, don't you think that right now, any mining company practically in the world, there's nothing they can get away with. There's so much scrutiny.
Yeah, the
And
mining industry has cleaned up its act because it's had to. It has no choice but to clean up
mm,
its act. And the public outrage to anything the mining industry does wrong is so strong, that
mhm.
it's so fierce. The mining industry has no leeway but to do things the right way. And so they do. And there's other industries out there that have some leeway and they get away with stuff that the mining industry couldn't get away with.
Yeah, that's
Um,
just true. Yes, and but most people, at least the folks that don't live in jurisdictions where there's a mine up on the side of the mountain, they don't. To them, this is all words. But when you go see the companies that do it well, like you go to the DRC in the Congo and you see Ivanhoe Mines operation, and you see schools, and you see people who are making a living, and you see way more bank accounts than have ever existed, and you see that being carried through over a decade or more. And at the Plot Reef in South Africa for the platinum operation, nickel, 2.5 decades, right? Where everything starts at the community level. Then you say to yourself, "Wow, this is how it should be done." But as you know, we all the world forms opinions based on words, and
Based upon
rare
newspaper headlines, and the
and
newspapers and the media want to cover negative stories, and so that's
yeah,
all the
I,
public ever sees
uh,
about mining
I
is the
guess. I mean,
negative. Yeah, it's
yeah.
true.
Well, I guess I don't know what's like everyone. I don't know what's true anymore and what's not. But as a journalist and I don't know, a person that uses words, uh, I I think it's multi-layered, um, and I just wish that more people in the entire world would actually see for themselves, and sometimes you can with video, right,
Hmm.
and satellites and satellite cameras and stuff. But I wish people wouldn't be so quick to judge, and would feel would chill out a little and say, what's really going on here? And and if money is important to me or wealth, uh, what should I be doing? And who does it well and fairly, right? Like
Hmm.
a great chef that, is creating a restaurant. There are a couple movements like this around the world where you're creating community kitchens, for-profit community kitchens, which is almost impossible, right? Where you charge for meals based on need uh,
But that sounds
and
like a San Francisco thing, Tom.
I know, but I think the first couple, I know we just went to a great presentation on this, but I think the first two are going to be one in the Bronx and one in Westchester County, but of one of probably several. But yeah, that's right. It's a San Francisco thing. You know, it's living here, Robert. I find myself, I tell a joke, you know, when I'm out there speaking, which I do less of these days because I so love going to the mines, and I so do not like anymore going to most of these investment conferences. I'll name my favorites, but I always joke, gee, when I wanted to put on a couple stickers on the garage door here. We live in a tech ghetto, right? To the right of us is Google, to the left of us is Cisco, across the street is Twitter's. And I'm not kidding, right? So we're fortunate to live in a very well, you know, very well endowed community here in Tiburon, California. But when I have to put a sticker on that says "I love uranium" or "I love gold," it's like, oh my gosh, you can't do that. What are you, crazy? You know, but they can put uh, but they can put stickers on saying "I love Musk" or "I love."
I'm not sure you could get away with that in San Francisco anymore. But I want
Correct.
to ask you. You love to go on site visits. I don't know of any other journalist or any other investor who goes on as many site visits as you do. We've met on a couple of these site visits.
Oh, at least two, at least
Yeah,
three.
three. Yeah, I think three. What is your most memorable site visit experience? Like, what really stands out to you out of all these visits you've had? Like, what is like a really memorable experience?
Well, picking out one, I'm not going to say I'm not going to give you Ivanhoe again because that was the most memorable one. The very first time I went to the Plot Reef, and it was private and with Robert, and we had to wear. He said, "Make sure you bring a tuxedo," and it's 110 degrees in South Africa there on the Bushveld, and all the tribal leaders were there, and we're in our tuxedos, and you know he's sealing this deal with the community, and boy, it was was it hot? But that was eye opening. I'd have to say, Robert, aside from the great Ivanhoe success story, I'd have to say at least a couple of the ones in Colombia, right? I mean, I lived in Colombia, Medellin, and I've been back there about 20 times since 2003. And it would have had to have been El Marmato, which is still a kind of a very, oof, El Marmato was like the mountain of gold, is I think what they called it there in Colombia, in the Antioquia Gold Belt, but so ravaged. I mean, if you wanted to see a place that looked like half of it was hell, you know, I mean, so much wildcat mining, and you have a couple companies now trying to, turn it into um, a more manageable thing. But that was a question not of success, but it was of seeing the ravages of mining, right? El Marmato. But aside from that, I mean, in terms of like spectacular, something that turned me on to a great investment, I'd have to say, and I think you were part of it, and it sounds a little mundane, but going to a working gold mine, the Eagle gold mine, recently. I mean, I've been there 3 times, and I know you were on one of those. But seeing, going through the entire process of an emerging gold producer, and then seeing the bars come out. I've seen maybe 10 or 15 of those in my life, but seeing Victoria Gold's Eagle Gold Mine in the Yukon, and how and having to us explained everything from scratch, and then going through everything else, including the kitchen and how the company is run, and the plants, right? The processing of the mines, the exploration, the smelting, the processing, the actual production of the gold bars. Uh, that was that was eye opening, because it makes you realize, okay, the exploration is great. It's like we can all be cowboys, but if you're really going to turn this into a success, how do you turn this into a working operation? It's not easy, especially in the middle of the winter in Yukon. So
Yeah, in a very, very cold, far northern place. But yeah, that's a great example, Tom, in the Yukon. And, that mine employs 400 to 500 people, and
yeah,
all very, very high paying jobs.
yeah,
That makes a difference in a lot of people's lives. And so that's an example. So you basically, you sort of talked about the mountain of gold in South America, and the sort of bad side, the downside of mining, when it's unregulated and just wildcatting everywhere, and people are just doing as they wish, just trying to make money. And then, the good side of it, we're actually building the first gold mine in the Yukon in a long time, and employing 500 people with high paying jobs.
yeah. It's like the difference between being on Mars and kind of picking your way through the Martian landscape and hoping that you don't fall down a hole or get splashed with mercury, and then going to a very modern, what can I say, factory, a factory of gold that is also rehabilitates you know the the landscape, and does what it's supposed to be doing, and ships its doré, regularly to the Canadian Mint on the East Coast, Royal Mint. So there's and then there's everything in between, including all these file cabinet companies that are full of beeswax. Um, I think that the more you go, right, and see for yourself, if you can, how it's done well. And let's face it, even if you do it well in mining, that doesn't guarantee success, because there's
Yeah,
there's so many pitfalls, right? The need for capital, bad
yeah.
luck, bad geologists, fraud. Uh,
Permitting is a big one, yeah. So
ooh,
you go on all these site visits, and I've heard some people say, I don't need to go on the site visits unless they're going to show me the drill core, and I can get some special information from the site visit, and because I know they're just going to show me the stuff they want to show me. And I mean, so I'm just trying to give you an example something I've heard from another investor about why they don't really care to go on site visits. What do you gain from the site visit, and how valuable has it been in your investment process?
Oh, I'd say it's critical, right? Because you know these days, especially, you have to see the interaction with the community. Look, I'm not a geologist, right? And I learn stuff just as you do every day about geology and exploration and metallurgy, uh, you know, and drilling and uh, you know 25, 30 other things that have to do with chemistry, physics, earth, you know, when it comes to mining. But I do know that if at least they've laid the groundwork for uh, uh, a pleasant experience and a productive experience for the community. And I've seen it blow up in people's faces, like with the Ejidos in Mexico and other places. At least that's that's kind of like the layer that you're going to start your cake on, and then from there, you're gonna get to see, well, who do they have doing this stuff, right? How is it being done? What are they finding? Um, that one in Jamaica, whose shares I own, where I was there a year ago. You're saying gold mining in Jamaica, C3, I think it's C3 metals, C3 mining.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds kind of crazy at first.
I know, but then you see it, and yeah, you see it's like, and of course, you know all the reggae is going on in the background, and you see these people sweating and doing the work and being happy about it. And then you get to see, of course, the drill core. I'm not a drill core expert, but I so appreciate, as you do, you know, having folks explain, you know, what makes powerful drill core when it comes to the alteration of the material. Um, you know, and this isn't just gold, as you know. It could be totally polymetallic.
Mhm.
It could be silver, platinum, palladium, nickel, copper. Um, and by the way, as a side point, Robert, you know, I've been saying this for a long time. I think copper should be a precious metal. I really do. I mean, because copper is so important. It always has been, right? It's like copper is the lingua franca of global growth, and maybe one day it will. Uh,
Well, it is a precious metal. It's valuable, but it's so abundant that it can't be put in the same category as gold and platinum and silver, right?
yeah.
It's much more abundant in the earth
Yep.
than gold. I want to hear you. We talked about your best investments. We talked about Robert Friedland and some of the big wins there. I want to hear your worst investment ever, your biggest failure as an
Well,
investor.
I I'm just coming off it here, and it was a biotech company, and you know I think all of my subscribers have have realized the pain and suffering that we suffered here at home, and the company was a Halifax um, cancer vaccine company, IMV, uh, and I am, as in Mary V, you know, went through the bankruptcy process just recently, and probably painful. And I held on till almost the very end. And I'd say our losses here at home were more than $500,000 US. Um, and I dragged, you know, I was for over a 9 year period, I was so positive that the DPX technology that IMV had for uh, uh, you know, different types of cancer, starting with ovarian, wa- was powerful. And I think it still is, but the company was so badly managed by folks who really didn't have a stake in the company. And it went through different layers of management, and it's like each one became worse and worse and worse. And you know what? I am on the record saying that these executives burned their shareholders by being way too promotional. I wish I could come up with a stronger word, right?
Yeah, I don't know the IMV story well. I just know a little bit of it through you and one other guy who's a biotech investor. And just from what I've heard, so I'm not saying this is facts, so don't go off of anything I'm saying here, and I'll let you verify it, Tom. But this company burned through something on the order of like 250 or 300 million dollars in the last 10 years. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that you're in the ballpark for sure. And
And what was all the money spent on?
well, I think the money. I don't think there was fraud involved. I think there was reckless spending, chasing after the next hot thing, like COVID and this vaccine and infectious disease, when they should have just been focusing on cancer. That's the simplest I could put it. That they're bored, and I know this because I've done some deep reporting on this company, and anybody who searches for the Calandra report or just my name and IMV will find dozens of scores of pieces about this company. I'm ashamed to say some of them way too positive at the time, but they chased after anything that could help them raise money, right, and survive another year or 2 years.
So they
And
had
one of
no
those things
long
was
term. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah,
Sorry.
one of those things was infectious disease, and I think they should have just been sticking to cancer, and they should have kept it small instead of trying to grow. But this is the case with lots of biotech companies. They were just a spectacular failure, and their financings were brutal and not very helpful to ordinary shareholders. And their decision to go on Nasdaq seemed like a great thing at the time, but it probably was one of the death knells because it allowed them to sell shares to you could have these
Yeah, the ATM is always
ATM,
open. Yeah.
right, at the market transactions, right, that allowed you to raise money. And
Mhm.
I would say stay away from any company that's doing those unless their chart looks like it's an ascent up
It's interesting. I own
Everest,
a
not down
company that
Everest.
has an open ATM, Tom, and
Yeah.
I'm a little bit down on it. What should I know about that?
Well, look, I mean, you can just hit the button, right, and raise money, and it's people are buying those. So what happens is people can manipulate news or news releases, right, to spur interest in the company. And I think you'll see um, that when there's all of a sudden a company that's trading that what had been trading 100,000 shares a day trades 18 million shares in a day. There was some event, some news or some press release, right, or some statement at a conference, right, and guess who's guess which company is also selling shares to ordinary folks at that same time to put money in its treasury and pay
Right.
themselves, right?
Whereas in like junior mining in Canada, you'd have to make an announcement of a private placement, and then the entire market would know. Okay, now there's 10 million shares available at 40 cents. So it wouldn't be done sort of in a stealth way, like they're selling 100,000 shares at a time into the market, right?
Right. I think, I'm definitely not a banker, but thank goodness I don't want to be a banker. But I think they're, I think that's correct. I don't think it's not easy to do an ATM on a Canadian exchange, whereas on Nasdaq, especially, it's very easy to have an at the market transaction. Now, of course, some of these Canadian companies that are terrific, whether they're in mining or energy, uh, are dual listed. So I mean, like IMV was dual listed, right? Toronto and Nasdaq, and so there's always that possibility, right? That if your company's dual listed,
Mhm.
you can have them raising money here and there and everywhere.
So with IMV specifically, if sorry to drag you through this again, but if you could really look inside, what was the big error that you made in allowing that become to turn into such a big loss for your
Uh,
family?
I must have had 20 people tell me you're on the wrong track here. You're on the wrong track. I should have, I'm not a technician. I don't believe in charts. I know you do, but I should have been, you know, careful
You
of
should
the
have
charts.
asked
Like
me
I had,
for my advice, Tom.
I know because you would have,
But
because you
you
would have.
wouldn't have listened anyway. This is the thing with investors. They won't listen anyway. You can
I
tell them
know.
something and they'll be like, I fucking know better.
Yeah. But by the way, that's also a sign of success, right? I mean, if you don't believe in what you're doing, why should anyone else believe it? But yes, it was like that's, as someone told me, that's a chart that only a mother could love, right? And so I should have listened to that one.
I've seen a few of those in my time, Tom.
That's right.
Only a chart of mother could love.
Only a chart that a mother could love. And
Yeah.
mother effer, I you know I still love the chart because I'm a value investor, and I fell into
Do you
got
love
sucked
those
into.
downtrending charts that just
I
keep
do. I
making
mean,
new lows?
yeah. Well, I love to buy when things are falling. That's the way value
But
investors are, and
so
it's
this
tough.
is an interesting area because this topic is such an important topic. Technical versus fundamentals.
Hmm.
And I believe after my 20 years of this that you have to do both. You
Hmm.
cannot be blind to one side of the equation. If you're blind to one side of the equation, then you're like boxing with one arm. Like, why
Hmm.
would you do that, right? And so you can do all the fundamental work you want and convince yourself how good something is, but if the stock keeps making new lows, then what the hell are you doing? The whole market is telling you it's worth less and less.
Hmm.
Why would you think that you know more than 100,000 people?
Well, there has to be belief there, and once again, I mean, I can, I can come up with many examples uh, of companies. Let's just stick to mining right now that were unfairly pummeled, and as you know, from I don't know 2011, 2012 through five, over the next 5, 6 years, it didn't matter how productive or profitable or fundamentally sound your company was in mining, you got crushed. And I just think that if you put on that way long range hat, which I've always been I've owned some of this stuff since 2001, some of these names, equity, uh, and of course the physical, not just gold but platinum, silver, etc. You have to be doubling down and doubling down again. It's easy enough to say, not easy to do, but that's why you name this. He puts his money where his words are, and that can be painful. And it was painful, and it can be on the downside. It's painful at home too. Let me tell you, because I get my
I
bum
think
bashed
that's
in
the
by
worst part. I think that's the worst part of being a
tension. Yeah.
junior mining investor, especially if you're married, is somebody else has access to your account and then you have to explain what the hell you're doing, right? It's like, that's not fun.
It,
So.
it's it creates well, it challenges you, and maybe you better grow from it. Otherwise, you're gonna be separated and divorced, and the kids are gonna be buying BB guns to shoot you behind, and stuff like that. Although, but Robert, in the good times, and it looks like our cycle is here again. And by the way, the upcycles in commodities, especially the precious metals, don't happen often. And if it looks like we're setting up for a longer upcycle than usual, as in a few years or more, then it's party, right? It's party city, and it's fun. And it used to be fun to invest in mining, just like it was fun to invest in technology. Uh, but then, as you know, for many years, it was like, oh my gosh, you're going to give me post-traumatic stress disorder thinking about investing in mining. Right. Well, I think the PTSD days are over.
Yeah. So if the PTSD days are over, which may be, we're not giving investment advice here. It's a possibility, just like going back into a bear market is a possibility. What are some of your favorite stocks right here, Tom? Like where are you putting your money in the junior mining sector right now?
Well,
You put your money where your words are. So what are you buying here in the last couple months?
well, first of all, getting burned on financings. You asked about some of my favorite site visits, and I mean, I started going to Extra Gold's site in the Kibbe in Ghana in 2009, and I've been there 5 times at least. And I love the fact that XTG, Extra Gold Resources, uh, entirely funds its operation with no financings because it has an alluvial subcontracting um, source of revenue that's been going on for many, many years, right? 2, 3, $4 million a year. That helps, and also to see the same employees, the same workers there in Ghana, which is a beautiful place. In 2000, since 2009, so Extra Gold, I'd say, is one of my favorites, and actually, it's one of the very few that stayed in the black, right? Even during those uh, uh, shallow, fallow years, uh, of the mid 2010s and onward. And so, that's one. And also, but they're doing great exploration. But I also think the emerging gold producers, right? Robert, I mean, as you know, the ones that are really rocking right now are the small emerging gold producers. They're legit, like that Eagle Gold mine for Victoria Gold, right? All of a sudden, you
Core
got 100.
mining is up 75% in the last month.
Yeah,
CTE. They're more of a mid tier, but yeah.
yeah. I mean, mid tier. I don't know. You would think I mean, is a mid tier more like 300,000 ounces a year or more? But
Yeah, like
yeah.
200 to 300,000. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Eagle's pressing in on
Yeah,
200,000.
I would put them. I would put VGCX as a mid tier. Yeah.
Okay. Well, so they're doing it, and and hopefully in a few years they'll be at 3-4 years, there'll be 300,000 ounces. And there you get the so-called leverage. Also, I mean, one of my absolute favorites is Alamos Gold. And Alamos has turned itself into a multi-mine producer, at least 3 mines, Canada, Mexico, and tremendous. And they're probably 500,000 ounces or more a year. And I think John McCluskey has turned that into probably the next major. Uh, now that Ivanhoe is certainly a major, but now you'll see Alamos become a multi-billion-dollar company. Right now, I want to say it's about $1 billion market cap, but I'm just that's just off the top of my head. But their gold production goes up, their dividend has been going on forever, and so I think you want to look at the ones that are the gold producers, especially that like when gold is rising, they're rising the most. Like Victoria Gold, like Alamos Gold, they're rising 3-4%, right, in a day, or 5%. That's a sign, that this is real, that their money that they're going to get from selling more expensive gold is good, and that they're not hedging, I hope, ever. Like we saw in the early 2000s, where you had companies hedging and kind of like slimming their profit margins so that they could make money when gold is going down, and then getting caught with their pants down when gold rose. So I don't know. I'd love to hear what your favorites are.
Oh man, you're putting me on the spot. Well, I made a video yesterday. I talked about Rupert, resources in Finland as a
Oh,
potential buyout
hmm,
target.
sure.
That's more in the mid tier, but it's not a producer, but they have a 5 million ounce, gold deposit. So that's a tier one
Wow.
asset.
Mm-hmm.
I think that one could get snapped up.
Mm-hmm.
A company that you and I both own is Banyan Gold. I think
Oh
that's
my
a good
gosh, yeah.
one.
Yes, that's right next door to Victoria Gold, Eagle Gold Mine. As you know, there's a family connection there. Not our families, but the two CEOs are married of those two companies, Victoria and Banyan. Boy, that's been a great producer. I remember you and I being there together. I've seen that one 3 times too, and I think that one got unfairly crushed. There was some kind of persistent seller up until recently, up until like 4 weeks ago, and now that's up about 40% in
Yeah, I
four in
think
4 weeks.
Yeah, I think that Banyan had a capitulation on November 28th. I think
Okay.
somebody got cleaned up. The seller got cleaned up on November 28th. And yeah, it has lifted. So it was low of 26 cents. It's 37 cents today. So that's a pretty good move.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, Robert, but I've had quite a few CEOs and CFOs and COOs call or email me saying, you know what, so and so just finally sold all of its shares in the company they had been selling, and I think that's the selling is over. Now that in the last 3 4 weeks, uh, uh, and there have been quite a few speculative exploration uh, stocks that have, you know, where they've done that. Now, if that turns out to be the case, then you can document that uh, with filings. But you know, when you look for that capitulation, you're the expert technically on capitulation. But it is great to see these washouts, right? Because as you know, there, if you're going to be throwing darts at the way too many mining companies in the world, you're more likely to hit the ones that are up 20 30% in a few weeks. And some of these things, as you know, in cycles like this, you can see a stock rise 40% in a day or a week or more. You can see a double or a triple in a month. And I'm hoping that we see a lot more of those.
Yeah, it's interesting. November was the capitulation month in the gold sector. You had Newmont bottom on November 10th,
Hmm.
and then
Right, in a day or
well, I made a video yesterday. I talked about, Rupert, resources in Finland as a
oh.
potential buyout
Hmm.
target.
Sure.
That's more in the mid tier, but it's not a producer, but they have a 5 million ounce, gold deposit. So that's a tier one
Wow.
asset.
Hmm.
I think that one could get snapped up.
Hmm.
A company that you and I both own is Banyan Gold. I think
Oh
that's
my
a good
gosh, yeah.
one.
Yes, that's right next door to Victoria Gold, the Eagle Gold Mine. And as you know, there's a family connection there. Not our families, but the two CEOs are married of those two companies, Victoria and Banyan. Boy, that's been a great producer. I remember you and I being there together. I've seen that one 3 times too, and I think that one got unfairly crushed. There was some kind of persistent seller up until recently, like right up until like 4 weeks ago, and now that's up about 40% in
Yeah, I
four in
think.
4 weeks.
Yeah, I think that Banyan had a capitulation on November 28th.
Mm,
I think
okay.
somebody got cleaned up. The seller got cleaned up on November 28th. And yeah, it has lifted. So it was low of 26 cents. It's 37 cents today. So that's a pretty good move.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, Robert, but I've had quite a few CEOs and CFOs and COOs call or email me saying, you know what, so and so just finally sold all of its shares in the company they had been selling, and I think that's the selling is over. Now that in the last 3 4 weeks, uh, uh, and there have been quite a few speculative exploration uh, stocks that have, you know, where they've done that. Now, if that turns out to be the case, then you can document that. With filings. But you know, when you look for that capitulation, you're the expert technically on capitulation. But it is great to see these washouts, right? Because as you know, there, if you're going to be throwing darts at the way too many mining companies in the world, you're more likely to hit the ones that are up 20 30% in a few weeks. And some of these things, as you know, in cycles like this, you can see a stock rise 40% in a day or a week or more. You can see a double or a triple in a month. And I'm hoping that we see a lot more of those.
Yeah, it's interesting. November was the capitulation month in the gold sector. You had Newmont bottom on November 10th.
Hmm.
And then a bunch of juniors started to bottom 2, 3, 4 weeks later. So the seniors bottomed first, early November, and then the sector began to really move up after Thanksgiving. and we've seen continuation here in the final weeks of the year, and even today, just looking at Founders Metals making new highs. A bunch of stocks are breaking out here today, making new multi-month or new 52-week highs. So I think, if you ask me for my ideas, I think you want to focus on quality management teams that have money, that don't need to raise, don't have a gun to their head here in early 2024, and that give you leverage to a rising gold price. So companies that have a lot of gold proven. Um, Another one would be Snowline. I think Snowline could be a
Oh my
very
gosh,
good
we
takeout.
just
Yeah, it
yeah
could be a.
yeah yeah we owned that
I
just
think
recently.
like Snowline is one of those top tier assets that's going to get snapped up. I mean, if gold is really making this move above 2100, I think somebody takes that in 2024, and that would be good for the Yukon as a whole as well. So
Hmm.
you probably see a lot of stocks move up if Snowline got snapped up.
Oh well, Scott and his team at Snowline have shown a great light on all of the Yukon and made people realize that Yukon territories, they're very, with the possible exception of Quebec and a few others around the world, Yukon is a great place to be mining. Right, you got a terrific workforce. Uh, you have a government that wants mining and and clean mining, and you just have to solve the power problem, the electricity problem. But once you do, you're going to see more and more momentum go to others. But Snowline has been the exploration leader, probably one of the top 10 exploration stocks in the world in the past 2 years, and it's made it's brought welcome attention to other companies like Western Copper and Gold, right? WRN in Yukon, once again Victoria, Banyan Gold, and one or two others. So I think when you have leaders that have well-run companies and they're clean and they've been doing this through father and son at Snowline for a long time, uh, it's, it helps everyone, and you can only hope that this continues and that company gets sold. I mean, we just saw a company that I've been following for 4 years in Namibia, Osino, got bought, and in a great deal by Dundee Precious Metals. But it could have been twice the value that it got bought at. I think the purchase price was I'm off the top of my
Dundee
head.
got a good deal there.
Yeah, Dundee Precious Metals got a great deal from Hayadon's Osino Resources, but at least you get half the stock, half the transaction price when it closes will be in Dundee stock. So hopefully you're going to get a higher Dundee price that will help there. But for sure, I've had the CEO of Osino, Haya Dawn, once again tell me that, look, let's face it, it's a little bit of a pity that we weren't in a hotter market, but he did what he could at Twin Hills to turn that into a for sure long life mine that Dundee is going to manage well. And but yeah, I think we'll see more and more of these stealth mergers and acquisitions, and I hope that some of them happen to some of these small companies. I think Banyan its days are numbered, right? I mean, I have to imagine that Victoria will be buying Banyan. They already own a nice percentage of it, but of course, they'll have to go through a few more hoops and make sure everything is you know uh, uh, how can I say totally cool with shareholders of both Victoria and Banyan. But I'm not saying that's for sure going to happen, but it does seem logical.
It seems logical, yeah. Tom, I want to open up the floor to a question from the audience. If anybody has a question for Tom, please raise your hand, ask to be a speaker, or call on you. I want to ask you one more question, Tom, and then we'll see if we get a question from the audience. One of the challenges in the junior mining sector in terms of attracting more, investors is younger people don't seem to be as interested. So there's a bit of attrition going on where we're all getting older, right? And the target market is getting smaller and smaller for who companies can attract as investors, as shareholders. Um, what would you tell somebody in their 20s who's like new to the sector but is kind of intrigued by it, wants to learn more, wants to figure out how maybe there's some opportunity here for them? What would you tell somebody, in their 20s?
Well, first of all, I'd say, like, our kids and their significant others are in their 20s, right? 23, 24, 27. First of all, I'd lay the groundwork by saying, all the toys that we have around here and that you guys have, whether it's your whether it's your cars, your motorcycles, your technology, it all starts with metals. Other people have said that, but and then after that, I would say, look, you, you want to be making money, and yeah, sure, you made money with AI, you made money with semiconductors, and stuff like that. But if you want to hold something, and hopefully you have a retirement account, whether it's 401k, if you work for someone else, or some way of compounding your investment capital over long periods of time, right? Even if it's it's 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, I, you're getting the best of both worlds. You're getting uh, uh, companies that are building the new planet Earth. Companies that are probably going to be around in their current form a lot longer than a lot of these technology companies. I'm nothing against the technology, and I think that we're seeing some tremendous things with uh, every part of technology, even publishing. But when it comes to owning something that deserves to be owned, and where you could see returns of 100% in a year or more, right? As you know, Robert, it's only going to take 1 to 2% of all the active investors just in North America to move the gold price from 2000 to from 2100 now, as we look, almost, to 4000 and 5000. And the other thing I would say is, remember, this isn't just some kind of chess game, some kind of silly board game where you're picking stocks and hoping that it goes up or goes down. It's not just stocks, by the way, it's bonds, it's the metal itself, and it's taking joy in owning some of the physical metal, like whether there's coins, bullion, platinum. But you, you're going to see companies, you're going to see institutions and ordinary folks and the world, not just North America, the world turn in a big way to metals, mining companies, and you're going to see some of these companies become leaders, political leaders, social leaders, uh, and when you do, somebody once told me, well, if only 1% of active investors turned to gold, the price would double overnight. And it's true. I mean, very few North Americans, including Canadians, and own gold and silver and platinum and palladium and copper. They don't own it somehow, right? And whether it's the physical or the equities, and when they start owning it, it's going to be glorious, uh, and it's going to be fun. And I think we, you and I, and a lot of other people we know have not had fun, and I want to have fun, man.
Let's have fun, Tom.
Yo,
We got a question from Peter Bell. Actually, this is a great question. It's not just junior mining. I think this is a life question. He asked you, so Tom, do you have any tips for new executives to survive the toxic people in the business? There's toxic people all over. How do you survive toxic people, Tom?
Whoa, hi Peter. I hmm. They say anybody who brings you down, stay as far away from them as you can. First of all, you have to go meet them. You can't just deal with them on the phone. And then, come on, your BS detector, as Hemingway called it, right? Your BS detector, as the great writer Ernest Hemingway called it, will tell you anybody that brings you down. Now, toxic can be people who try to manipulate you, right, and try to be something they're they say they are, but they're not really. Maybe there's fraud involved. Maybe there's artifice, or maybe they're just trying to raise money. But I think that the toxic question, look, I always tell our folks at the Calandra Report that I only now, having been burned so many times, I only invest in companies where I personally know the the executives and some of the folks that work on the ground, the geologists. I mean, probably in Canada, my best example is one of my best examples, besides Jimmy Longshore at Extra Gold, is Glenn Mullen, who's had some great successes in Val-d'Or with Val-d'Or Mining and Abitibi royalties and, uh, and things like that, where you get to know them, you get to know their families, you get to know what they believe in, and all you need to do is spend a day or two with any human being to know whether they're toxic. Do they make you smile? You know, do they? What do they read? I had this presentation at PDAC last year, Robert, where I talked about trusted sources. How do you develop a trusted source, right? And for me, it's you have to meet them first of all, and then for me, a trusted source, I only have maybe 10 in mining, 10 out of the 1,000 folks that I've met over the years, or 2,000, who knows. Oh, Uh, but you have to know, what do they read, what do they watch on TV, how do they treat their families. Uh, too many questions like that. How do they manage your money? How do they how do they respect? How do they give back? Uh, so
Yeah, I think the simplest one there is you can figure out what somebody wants from you in about an
mm,
hour. And once
mm,
you understand what they want from you, you can understand if you can work together, if
mm,
you're aligned, like you can give them what they want,
mm-hmm,
and maybe you can receive something in return from them, and you can do it in a way that's in integrity, right?
mm-hmm.
Um, that's simple. If somebody wants something from you and you don't want to give it to them or you can't, then it's going to be toxic, right?
Yeah, and it's a beautiful world. There's so many. All of us are unique, right? We 8 billion people. We all each one of those 8 billion people is has a separation in terms of their in terms of who they are, every single one of us. And so there is so many layers of uh, beautiful layers, but of psychology, of intelligence, of motivation. Some of us are better off than others. Some of us have challenges, whether they're physical or mental. But yeah, uh, anyone that you meet for the first time, or that you're looking at as an investment, see if there are any strings attached. If there aren't any string, if there are no strings attached, and they want to listen to you, that was one of the things from my presentation. I said, you have to have people who listen. And most of these folks, as you know, I mean, how many times, Robert, have you and I been on a Zoom call or a presentation in person anywhere where they're not listening? They're just going nonstop, like I have been on this on this beautiful space.
We got one more question, Tom.
Okay.
Tommy, final question here. Tommy Humphreys.
Oh, yo.
Can you explain, and I don't even know how to say this, so I'm just going to say it in the dumb American way. Can you explain nut graph to us?
Well, Tommy's getting, Tommy and I have been sharing some great tips about writing, right? Because he he's as you know, was the founder of CEO.ca, which got bought by Goldspot, which is now, I guess, Earth Labs. And um, I was, I guess Tommy had never heard of it, but in journalism or in journalism school, you have what's called the nut graph. But anybody can have a nut graph. A nut graph is like you're reading a story, or you're watching a broadcast or listening to a video, and if it's deductive, somewhere in the second or third paragraph graph, there's the nut. There's like, why is someone writing about this? Not just the lead, right? The lead graph is like, you know, um, more and more Americans are, I don't know, go pick any story. I don't have a newspaper or a magazine in front of me, and I'm not watching any of the broadcast channels right now. But why break, break it open to me? Why is someone listening to this story? Why is this story important? Why should I care? That's the nut graph. It's like, who does this affect? Who's your audience? Not just like 20 people were, you know, uh, uh, 20 people were, uh, hurt in a train crash. The nut graph is life. Like, in the past 8 years, India's had 14, train crashes that have killed, you know 10,000 people. I don't know, but that's on the negative. But on the positive, it's like, you know Americans are reporting, or anyone, uh, any country is seeing less and less violent crime. And then that violent crime, the drop in violent crime, the nut graph is going to be, the experts say that it's the rising, it's the global economy that's helping ameliorate crime in their cities. So, I mean, the nut graph is like, why should I continue reading this or watching this? And I think that broadcast needs to do a better job of that. I think, in writing, when you have the nut graph, Tommy's been doing a great job with nut graphs at his new venture. It helps. So,
A 22-year-old college student just made $100 million on this junior mining stock. Read more to find out. So that's a way to capture somebody's attention, right?
yeah, but those are attention grabbers. I mean, I think like in the past, the birth of the internet and then the web, in the past 15 years or so, we've seen those come-ons, right? The top 10 this, and the top 10 places to live in the world, and that, and they never name it because they want to get you
Yeah.
into the article. I forget what type of
The classic, junior mining pitch is read more, read more, read more. Now give us your info to find out what the actual investment idea is. Sign up, sign up, sign up. And it's just so tired. It's so overused, but you still see it all the time.
Yeah, but look for more. And if you look for more of a deductive approach, that's inductive, right? And inductive, try to stay away from it unless you got time to read a novel or two. But deductive means give us the goods in the first paragraph or two. Give us the real goods, like what CEO Technician does, and what the Calandra report does, and what Tommy Humphries is doing, right? And what I guess Peter Bell hopes to do with his next company. So, I mean, it's all beautiful, and we're not the answers to the world, and we all make a lot of mistakes, and I probably make more than anyone. But in the end, having folks, and Robert, I know you give back to the community, as a teacher and instructor and lover of kids and stuff like that, and um, uh, let's hope that our community, our community of long-suffering precious metals investors, will thrive and give back and make all these tech ghetto people who live around us who are super rich feel like paupers because we now seize the day.
I don't need anything too spectacular. I'm a simple guy, Tom. But yeah, it'd be nice to have a good few months in the sector. Tom, this was a fantastic conversation. I honestly think this may be my best space ever. So thank you for making it happen, for all your insights, all your wonderful words and thoughts and experience in life. I will post this on my YouTube channel at Goldfinger Capital. Just give me a couple days because these uploads are a little tricky off X. They don't want you to take anything off this platform.
Yeah.
But thank you, Thom. It's fantastic.
Oh,
How
this is
about
terrific. Yeah. Have a happy new year, and let's rock and roll. I'll see you soon. I know I will, Robert.
yeah? I'll see you in Vancouver in January.
Okay, beautiful.
Cheers, buddy. Thank you
Cheers.
all.
Ciao, ciao.